But I will give proper opportunity if anyone wants to ask any questions or clarifications on what we've looked at tonight. I'll caveat everything by saying you understand that the church tradition stories that are difficult to try and explain quickly where they all come from, because they're often research work where there's a quote here and a quote there, and you match them together and you can see that they fit and the times work and so on. So it's not easy to just be able to say go and check this chapter and verse like you can with the biblical ones, but we know something happened, and this is good speculative research style work, trying to fit it in those ways. But please ask whatever questions that come up. Would anyone like to ask anything?
Question, but I just guess it is amazing the number of Jewish believers and converts and people of faith around the Roman Empire, wasn't it? I mean, to think that 10 to 15% of such an enormous area had that, had that, so were either Jewish or had that strong connection. It's amazing.
No, it really is, and part of it is because they held together so long as kind of communities, and therefore they stayed kind of Jewish for quite a long time before they start to kind of bleed out and mix with the other communities, and they retain such a strong cultural identity that even those who were in that kind of half and half stage. So part of that mix is that kind of a way. But it is quite remarkable, yes. And as I say, from my point of view, I'm increasingly of the view it is part of why the latter part of the Old Testament history goes the way it is because God is preparing, He is preparing the ground. So in one sense, lifting the paganism to see its failings of when it's just lots of little gods, to understand the significance of a kind of a preemptive supreme God, even if it doesn't cross that barrier, of creating community life, which is very different from temple life of the pagans, of spreading people who understand the stories and can understand Jesus easily. So if you think while the apostles are trying to work out what he means, at least when they're communicating to people who share the foundational understanding, and so the doctrine is able to come about even in the discussion of those things, and yet they've also made social connections into the world around them. So it's a very, for me, it's a very rich and kind of quite interesting sort of. It doesn't take away the supernatural element in any sense to me, but. And hopefully not for you as well, Peter.
No.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else want to ask or say anything?
I was thinking about along the same lines. I mean, this is completely different. But when I went to North Korea, I was struck by the fact that they have a setup that is all ready for the gospel to be preached, basically, because they have an eternal flame, they have a book, they have a savior who loves children, they have a couple of train stations called Revival and Reformation, and it's this, that sort of idea that God doesn't actually ever leave those things.
No. No, and I always say if you're looking for books that everybody ought to read as a Christian, I would always put Eternity in Their Hearts as one of those books, because that for me, as I read it as a teenager, was one that really brought home the fact that God has sown a testimony into every nation of the world. That is kind of, and that becomes a point of contact. So it's not surprising if we find that he's done that in spades for the birth of the gospel and the spreading of the gospel to start with. So you find it all over the world with tribes that have stories and so on. And the way the early church used to see it, they'd say it wasn't that kind of somehow something has been borrowed from paganism, but that God, the theology which they used to refer to, the theology of condescension, which is that whenever God speaks to us, he has to speak to us in terms that we will understand. That theology meant that he would create a story, elements of the story of Jesus, that have resonance with people who are looking for something divine and see it in a certain pattern. So that they would almost say there are elements of Jesus' story which kind of God has taken on board specifically to make it understandable to the people in certain traditions. So if I mention Sibylle, because there's a lot of kind of, what about these comparisons? You can see it in the Roman Catholic Church, but for instance, they had the phrase "washed in the blood of the Lamb" or "washed in the blood of the bull." Could be both, but the fact that they said "washed in the blood of the Lamb," you can see. And so you can look at that cynically and go, oh, well, Christianity borrowed that from them. But the early church was very aware of that, but they saw it as the opportunity that God had given them to actually express to that community, because because initiation into the cult of Cybele meant being washed in the blood of your sacrifice, you see. And so they had that phrase, washed in the blood of the bull or washed in the blood of the lamb. But as I say, if you see God active in those things, which you can see in the end of the Old Testament, the spreading out, and the transformation, turning over the soil effectively, mixing with the pagan world in a way that they keep themselves separate, but also they raise its standards, they raise its eyes a bit. So I think it's really interesting, but I can go on for ages. so I'll try and keep it quick. Thanks, Terry. Would anyone else like to say anything or ask anything?
What was that book you mentioned a Christian book?
Yeah, the one I just said about everyone should read.
Yeah.
So the book is called Eternity in Their Hearts. Yeah. It's by a missionary whose name is Don Richardson. He's written a few books, but that was the really important one. And what he does is he highlights stories from all over the world, mission stories, about how when sometimes missionaries get there and they miss the opportunity, they don't see the opportunity, and they're often very unsuccessful. But very often where there's been successful kind of missions outreach, do you know what it is? I'm looking at my face, and I seem to be kind of in a little one. I've got. Can you see? You can see right through my face there. Yeah, it's virtual background. There we go. I have a green screen. Get rid of that. There we go.
There we go. What?
Oh, hang on. It's changed my.
Bits of that were appearing. Bits of that background were appearing in some of the maps on occasion. But.
Okay. Well, the good news is when you watch the recording, because I use my local recording, that hasn't got that on. So. Yeah, and I told you all to turn your microphones off, so you couldn't tell me you're disappearing there. I must remember, because I'm using two systems, one to present on, and I've got green screen on that, and then if I had a green screen meeting over on on Zoom, it then doubles it, you see. So there you go. Anyway, on that irreverent note, maybe we should let folks get on for the evening then. But I won't say if everyone has a really dying question they want to ask, please do take the opportunity. No. Okay, well, bless you all for turning up. Oh, it's worth me just mentioning. Sorry, that just it's not obviously when I used to do these as live sessions, we used to take an offering at the end of these things. I know some people are very good and they support me anyway, but part of wanting to do these teachings, if you feel like you're getting something worthwhile out of it, there are various links we've given in there, so that's I kind of live by ministry, but I don't want to ever exclude anybody. So yeah, but I just mentioned that at the end. Good. Well, thank you all. And I look forward to seeing you next week, which hopefully we won't take so long on. And we'll kind of start drawing the pieces together. Good.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
I will end the
Bye,
meeting.
Christian. Thank you.
Bye.